It's time for Remodel Revolution. And now, an award-winning contractor with over 40 years' experience. Here is Alex Guthrie.
Welcome to another episode of Remodel Revolution. I'm your host, Alex Guthrie. I have needed to have this show for quite some time. It is the time of year that you need to start thinking about your swimming pool. It's been pretty interesting here in North Texas because our weather pattern has been kind of funky this year. We had about 2 weeks of winter so far, and here it is just about the 1st of February. We barely had any cold weather, but this is the time of year that you need to start looking at your pools. So I invited our pool expert, Jeremy Blackwell with Blackwell's Blue Water, to come in and have a discussion with us this morning about how to, or what we should be doing with our swimming pools this time of year to get them ready for winter. And maybe I want to talk about some remodeling of swimming pools with Jeremy, because I get a lot of people asking me about that. And there's not a lot of companies that, you got to be pretty careful about who you hire to remodel your pool. So welcome to the show, Jeremy Blackwell. How are you, buddy?
Very good, Alex.
That's great. That's great. So here we are in our winter, but if we're in other parts of the country, it's like right now snowing in Arizona. So you never know what's going to happen. But give us a few tips. First of all, let's talk about your company and how long you've been in business. You were born into the pool business.
Yeah, I was actually very young when I was first introduced to swimming pools and maintenance, repair, construction. My father started me working for him when I was about 13 years old.
Wow. Did he pay you?
No, not at first. No.
Were you just the grunt?
I was not the grunt either. I was too lazy for that.
You're too lazy to be the grunt.
I had to learn by happenstance.
Yeah, well, that's the best way, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it sure is. So your company, how long has your company been in business?
We've been in business for over 10 years.
Wow.
Approaching 14 years.
But you're not just like 23 years old. So how long, you've been in the business 20 years, 25 years?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too specific for all our viewers out there. They can tell by the gray hair.
Well, at least you've got some. Okay. So is there a cheap way to do a swimming pool? I keep, people, well, I know they shop around and they're always looking for a better deal. How do you do a pool cheap?
To build one or to
maintain one? To build one.
Well, in my expert opinion, the cheapest way to build a pool is hire a professional to do it. There's a lot of people that cost you a lot of money when they don't know what they're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a friend that was in the pool building business as part of her business, and she got out of it because she said it was a nightmare for her. She didn't have any idea how bad it could get, and it can get pretty tough. There's a lot of regulations that are going to go on. I mean, a pool is sort of a luxury item, right? Mm-hmm. And so it used to be you would just go and dig a hole in the backyard and get everything out of the way, old plumbing or whatever's in the way, get it out of the way, tree roots, all that stuff. Throw some steel in there and some gunite and maybe a drain, maybe a light. Pools were fairly simple. I mean, those pools you're now remodeling or tearing out because they weren't done like they should have been done. Now you're going in and you're putting pier systems in them. You're doing all kinds of stuff. Talk to us about sort of the process you have to go through as a pool builder.
Well, the number one thing you got to ask yourself, first of all, is what is your budget? Budget to me as a contractor is somebody that has about $50,000 to $60,000.
Is that a medium-sized pool?
That's about average, yes. And About 10,000 of that I would reserve for soils conditioning. And one of the
Tell
most
us what that is.
quite often, in swimming pools, there's two things that happen. They either sink or they lift. And that's based upon the soils, what kind of dirt you have. And you'll have to hire a soils engineer to do a sample if you don't already have that done of your property. And that'll cost you probably about $1,500 to $2,000. And he will tell you what you need to do to make sure your ground is stable.
So when you're digging, and particularly in this part of North Texas, you run into a vast array of soil conditions. Tell us kind of two or three of those. Give us some examples of different soil conditions.
Well, as it's quite often quoted from the Bible, wise man builds his house on the rock. So ideally, you would like to have very rocky soil. And sometimes it can be more upfront cost because you have to get a jackhammer out to make the hole, and they charge by the hour for that. But you have a good foundation that you're putting your pool in. And then the next below that would be clay, good clay. That's good to build in, but the worst would be sand-like soil. And
the worst is sandy because of movement?
Because of ground movement, correct.
It's interesting because, and I know this is, regardless of where you are in the country, this is probably going to always be the case, but there's areas where we have real shallow rock, which is great for building anything, buildings, roads, whatever. And then we have places where we have big, like you drill down 13, 14 feet, and you hit water. And so you have to deal with a whole lot of different conditions when you're digging in the ground like that, particularly going deep. You have to then get an engineer you have to involve an engineer to make recommendations on how you deal with that structure going in that soil. Let's talk about that.
So what an engineer will do is he'll take your soils report and he'll do a series of tests. He'll introduce moisture to the soil. He'll look at the makeup of the material, and he'll determine what the soil does in response to his test that he performs. And then he'll make a recommendation based on the swimming pool. The most common recommendations that are made are moisture conditioning, where they inject the ground with water and sometimes with lime to stabilize the soils. And then you'll excavate the pool area, and now you're building into a solid foundation. To me, it's a lot of money. It's about 10 grand to do that kind of work. But to me, that's cheap insurance when you're going to spend $50,000 on a swimming pool.
Well, when people hear, a lot of times when people hear the word engineer, they have a meltdown. They're like, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me tons of money for the engineer, tons of money for what he says to do. But my answer to them is, think about the tons of money it's going to cost to fix what goes wrong if you don't have the right recommendations.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
That is the biggest point of getting a expert in soils engineering to determine how viable your lawn is. And it's kind of like, when you go to build something, if you don't have a blueprint, then you're not going to do a very good job building it, because there are going to be certain things that were not thought about. And the engineer's job will give you a blueprint of the soils and what they need to look like in order to receive a structure like that.
So now we've got the pool in. Tell us about some of the things you're doing these days that are different than in the past: lighting, drainage, the filtering systems, things like that. How complex have these pools become?
We live in the age of smart devices, so just about everything to do with your swimming pool can be controlled from your phone now.
Right.
And that's really cool. They even have chemical treatment systems that can be adjusted remotely by a professional. NOR Systems is a product that we install that offers this service, and they can check if your chlorine levels are off. They can adjust them remotely. Your acid levels are off. They can adjust them. So it's really cool, the technology. And plus, there's a lot of LED lighting. And that makes for a better light. Used to, they had them old Sam's light, and it just rotated a lens in a circle to get colors, and they broke all the time, and it was expensive. But with the LED lighting, they're pretty foolproof, and if you ever have an issue and need to replace it, it's pretty inexpensive. So
it's kind of a plug and play type of light. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And they cast just as much light as the old halogen bulbs that we installed.
Last a whole lot longer.
Yes, they do.
In theory.
And more energy efficient as well. And that's a pretty big deal these days.
Now, when you build a pool, you put in what we used to call a skid pack. I guess you're still doing skid packs, but it's basically got the pumps, and it's got the filters, and it's all that, and it's all kind of put together you plop it down wherever it goes and hook everything up to it. That sounds pretty simple.
They don't. You can buy them put together on a skid like that, but it's typically more affordable if you buy piece by piece, and that's where it is very important to hire a professional that is going to install products that are not going to fail.
It seems to me it's a really complex system when you're having to circulate water through a filtration system, maybe a heater. A lot of people now aren't using chlorine. They're using alternate types of water treatment. What are some of the things other than chlorine? You've got salt.
You have salt, you have bromine, and then also you have chlorine gas, which people are still doing that, but not as common. And then what is becoming very popular is bleach.
Bleach, really? Mm-hmm. Isn't that a form of chlorine?
Yes, but it's a highly diluted form of chlorine. So you'll add 1 gallon, and that's about the equivalent of 1 pound of shock. And it's actually a little bit more safer on your pets and on the lawn. It's less harsh on your bathing suits as far as color, and on your skin as far as what the chlorine will do is drying you out. And what it does is it doesn't introduce some of the things that make a tablet or chlorine a solid form. So you're introducing stabilizers, you're introducing calcium with the powder chlorines and with the tablets, and those things are a necessity in chemistry, but at some point they're a problem. And you can't get rid of your cyanuric acid or your calcium without draining the swimming pool.
Oh.
So bleach kind of helps prevent that. And that's becoming even more popular every day. And they have those on an auto feed system also. You'll fill a drum up and it'll have a pump, and they'll take a reading of your water, and they'll just introduce this bleach as the water needs it.
So it's sort of like maintenance free from the homeowner standpoint.
Well, as far as the chemistry is,
right, the chemistry, which is really what gets a homeowner
in trouble.
Most of us don't understand the chemistry involved in keeping the water clear, which is essentially what you're trying to do. If you are enjoying these videos and these interviews, please go to my YouTube page. That's Remodel Revolution on YouTube, and subscribe and share. We really enjoy doing these, and we want to get the word out and have more people involved in our program. Also, of course, as you're watching right now, we're live on Facebook on Wednesdays and live on YouTube as well. So check out our social media pages. We're on, we're on YouTube and Facebook, and we're on Pinterest, and we've got our podcast on Spreaker. Check it all out. Follow us and subscribe, and thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay. Excuse me. I got a frog. We're talking about that dirty pool water. I got a little frog in my throat. I don't know why. Now let's move on to, I wanted to go through that process because there's a complexity to pool systems. So when you get to the winter time or the off season, you need to do some things to ensure that when you want to get back in that pool during swimming season, everything's not gone to hell in a handbasket. Give us some advice on some of the things that need to be done to, prep for the winter.
Well, as you're shaking down your equipment, you're getting ready for a swim season, it's always important to just double check your baskets. You may get through a hard fall, and then the baskets fill up with leaves. The suction and the pressure of the pump tends to split them and bust them. It'd be a good time to just kind of make sure all your baskets are in good shape. If you have a cartridge filter, sand filter, DE filter, it'd be a good time to go ahead and break those down, take the media out, clean them real well, put them back together. We'll be honest, in the winter, most people don't even look out their window at their swimming pool when it's cold.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things that you don't really notice how unclear your water is, or how much stuff is actually passing through the pumps or through the filter and back into the water. So it's a good time to just kind of go through all the steps that it takes to catch your debris. That I'd say would be one of the most important things. And then I would start looking at those things that are aesthetically pleasing or supposed to be. And it would be best to get those done before the swim season so you don't lose any of it.
Now, what about, do you have to worry about the plaster staining or anything like that if you don't keep up with your water? Is that a problem?
Absolutely. That is the biggest problem is in the industry, even brand new swimming pools, the guy can only do so much to deliver to you a pretty plaster. It's up to the homeowner or their service technician to provide. I mean, it has to be immaculate chemistry to keep plaster looking new and fresh and the same color. And if you don't maintain proper calcium levels, you end up with them big white clouds in your dark plaster.
Right.
It's very disgusting.
Right.
And people just really get turned off with that. And there's only so much you can do.
But you've used, now I've seen you use different applications to that plaster. A lot of people like that dark blue or, these colors. What are those things?
So you have different kinds of colors, formulas based on different products, but Diamond Bright is a very popular one. But I use the alternate. I use Quartzscapes, and you can get that in any color just about. And what we do is when we start a swimming pool up, we say we want to put in like an aquamarine color, and it's any white chalkiness that is possible will stand out like a sore thumb on that. And when you start the pool up, what we'll do is we'll test the water that is being introduced to fill the swimming pool, and we'll see the calcium levels in it. And if there's low calcium levels, then we'll introduce calcium as the pool is filling. It's called an Orenda startup. And most of the time, discolored plaster is when the water gets introduced to the swimming pool and it's touching that new plaster, that water is demanding some level of hardness. So it's going to draw calcium out of that plaster. That's where you get the modeling. And that's where you get the big white cloud.
Is that efflorescence?
Sometimes it is, and it's called that by a lot of people, especially in the concrete industry. They call them efflorescence, but what it really is, it's actually calcium deposits and growth on the plaster, and it's creating a major discoloration that is not what you wanted to pay for.
When do we need to start prepping this? Let's say we can kind of see the weather's about to change and we're going to want to start using our pool in the spring. How far in advance should we call you and say, okay, let's get this thing in shape and ready to swim in?
I would definitely not be the April Fool and try and get your schedule during that month. So prior to April 1st is your best bet, or you're going to be in line with about 30 other people scrambling.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, wait till the last minute.
Yeah, every year the schedule is so ruined, and it's very hard to get people. Nobody, like I said earlier, nobody even looks out their window at their pool this time of year.
Right.
So
right.
it's until they start having beautiful, gorgeous days and the grasses are in bloom and the flowers are in bloom, they start thinking about swimming just like every other American. And then they realize they got some work they need to do.
So pool heater needs to get turned on at some point if you have a pool heater. How fast can a pool heater actually heat up the water enough to swim in cool weather?
There's a couple anomalies there. First of all, if your pool's not sized, your heater's not sized to heat the pool, but only the spa, that's a cost-saving measure a lot of pool builders take, is they only size your heater to heat the spa. And so it would take days to heat the pool with a small heater. It's like having a window unit.
Probably pretty expensive, I imagine.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Natural gas or propane, very expensive to heat the pool. You're looking at several $100s, depending on the size of the pool.
Ow.
And so typically I don't really encourage people to heat their pool until right at the onset of spring to try and increase your
solar heating. Yeah.
They do sell a cover that you can put on your pool that has little solar crystals, and that will introduce UV to the water and raise the temperature as well. That'd be more economical.
And that leads right into my next question, which is pool covers. Do they really help a lot, or is it just keeping leaves out? Does it help keep the pool in condition over the winter season?
It's kind of a catch-22. It does stop the pool from filling up. If you have a lot of trees, then yeah, you want to cover. But if you don't have very many, I wouldn't encourage it. The problem with putting a cover over it, it's very hard to pay attention to the water and what it needs. And then also, trash still gets underneath the cover, and it still gets into the swimming pool, and you have a very hard time knowing there's piles of debris there. And when you pull your cover off, you end up with a lot of leaf stains.
Right,
and then you're really not real happy with the condition of the pool when you open it up.
And then finally, my last question for you is pool safety and some of the things that people need to do around their yard. I know there's some codes that you have to abide by. What are some of the safety things that people need to do, particularly if they have small children?
My favorite for people with small children is they sell pretty neat little watches on Amazon that you can buy, and it's really cool. You can buy it in all different kinds, for a boy, for a girl, whatever. and you put it on your child, and if they get that wet, then it sends an alarm off in your house.
Wow.
So I think
Wow.
that's
great.
super great technology because you know, you have door alarms, but what if your kid goes out the front door and around the side gate? Or what if they climb, right? Kids climb, they can climb the fence and get in. This is something that lets you know right away, look at the pool.
So some of the requirements by most cities are that you have a fence that can't be climbed, but of course we know a kid can climb anything, and that you have self-closing gates, self-closing, self-latching gates, and that all the doors from the house have to be self-closing and self-latching. Is that correct?
On the house is not so much, but on the gates especially. But they do require house alarms on the doors. So that's how they their definition of securing.
Oh,
Commercially,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Commercially, they have. Oh,
And commercially, the windows, all windows downstairs have to be fixed. You can't open them.
wow, that's interesting. Well, what is the first thing you tell people when they're thinking about, or they call you up and they go, we're thinking about a pool, but we're not 100% sure we want to do it, or maybe we're not 100% sure we can do it. What is your first thing, your first bit of advice to a homeowner thinking about a pool?
Budget.
Really?
Realistically, you just, at some point, everybody wants a Ferrari, but can you afford one?
Right, right.
And so the best compatibility test you can possibly have is just think about how much money you're willing to invest to do a pool. And what I said earlier, I'd think around 50 to 60,000. If it comes in less, great. But that's a good, healthy number to give you something that you want.
Fantastic, fantastic. I really appreciate you coming in and spending the morning with us. That's great, great advice.
No problem.
Man,
Thank you very
let's
much.
do this again soon. We'll do it again this spring at the, we'll talk about getting the pool ready to swim in. And you can talk about that discount you're going to give for those new pools, for all that big money you're talking about.
All right. Sounds good.
Jeremy Blackwell with Blackwell's Blue Water Pools out of Fort Worth, Texas. Check him out, and we'll be right back. The hardest working and arguably most important system in our homes is our air conditioning and heating system. It heats the air, it cools the air, and it filters the air. That's why it's so critical to have it checked and maintained by the very best professionals available. It's time to contact Total Air and Heat at totalair.com. Get that system pruned and tuned. If you want to have the very best experience, you've got to hire the very best company. Total Air's employees are honest, well-trained, and thoroughly background checked. I never have to worry about sending their technicians out to my clients' homes. Family owned and operated for 3 generations, Total Air and Heat has been a fixture in North Dallas for over 60 years. Total Air is a proud dealer of the Trane air conditioning systems, and you know how hard it is to stop a Trane, so give them a call at 972-881-0020. That's 972-881-0020, or contact them at totalair.com today. Imagine this, a totally customized, organized, and beautiful master closet. A home office that fits right into a perfect space. A pantry designed specifically for your storage needs. Imagine your home totally organized. It's time to call the design professionals at Closets by Design DFW and turn your dreams into a reality. With a design staff over 30 strong, Closets by Design works directly with you to create your dream space, and they build it locally, helping support the DFW community. Check them out at dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. Use the promo code RRV to find out about the amazing specials and discounts available. That's dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. And don't forget that promo code RRV, Closets by Design. One of the great innovations that we've had in construction in the last few years has been a product that I really, really enjoyed learning about. And I sort of started talking to my friend Duffy Frazier about this about 2-3 years ago when it was still in the beta phase. and they were testing houses to sort of get their system working. The system is called Aero Barrier, and Aero Barrier is sort of a liquid that they actually introduce into the air of primarily new homes, and then they pressurize it, and it fills all the little holes on the outside of the house, on the exterior walls, and allows the house to become super, super efficient from the standpoint of air infiltration. So I asked Duffy and Matt Merkel and Justin to come on today, and let's talk about Aero Barrier now that they've got some practical experience with it, and they know how it's going to work, and they can kind of give us some more details on it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about if there's any application for it for remodeling. So welcome to the show, guys. Do we have sound with everybody?
Can you hear me? This is Duffy calling in remote from my cell phone.
I hear you, Duffy, and you on the screen, you're just a phone. And that's really how, that's a very attractive picture of you. It looks very good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, Duffy. Hello, Matt. How are you?
Hi, good morning. I think we have, I'm very well. I think we all just have a fear of talking over each other. So that's why you got a bunch of hand waves.
And then Justin is a Aero Barrier installer locally here in North Texas. And we thought we needed him because somebody has to know how to do it. How you doing, Justin?
Yes, sir.
So, Matt, you're the national sales rep for Aero Seal and Aero Barrier. And I'm curious, how is this product taken off nationally? How is it? Are your builders implementing it?
That's a great question. So Aero Barrier on a national level is something that's really kind of starting to make big waves in the industry. We have, up to this point, thousands and thousands of applications yearly on a national level, and really just a very brief history of the company, just for context for yourself and your listeners. We kind of started the patent for this was in 2016, and it really kind of has that garage story, if you will, of an idea that a very brilliant person worked on, Mark Madera, had an idea to essentially fix HVAC systems in real time through the ductwork and make them more efficient. And as that became something that was an option for homeowners, we then expanded that idea to create Aero Barrier, essentially a very similar application, but for the building envelope. And so this little kind of kernel of an idea has now exploded to include a Rolodex, including obviously Justin as our installer in Dallas, and the other everyone else that we have in the country. Mm-hmm. So it's really something that the wave is kind of washing over and is prevalent in all four corners of the United States.
Is there a niche market for? I mean, does it matter what climate zone you're in, whether or not it makes more or less sense for you?
Well, I would say in your climate zone, it certainly would. Mm-hmm. It is always seemingly very, very hot year round. And so the idea is how do we keep that hot air out, create that continuous air barrier throughout, and allow the occupants to stay comfortable. Mm-hmm. But I mean, really, I don't think it matters what part of the country you're in. Everyone wants an efficient home. And
I mean, some parts of the country were fighting. Pardon me for walking on you there. Some parts of the country were fighting the cold more than the heat, and just the opposite here. And so I can imagine. I can't see where there would not be a great place to use this product. Justin, it seems like to me, as a contractor and a builder, I've had a fear from time to time of air leakage around foam because we're using so much foam now that if we have moist air come in, and particularly in any excessive amount, or even, of course, water leakage, that we can create a whole different issue with not only air quality, but mold and things like that. Have you looked at this or had experience along those lines with the aero barrier and how it's kind of protecting that type of penetration from the exterior wall?
Absolutely. So we do a lot of houses with foam, and they vary on where they start with 2.5 air changes to up to 7 air changes. We have started spraying air barrier on a foam house. So yes, I mean this will definitely help with the moisture. It has no negative impact on moisture control. So obviously, the less outside moisture air coming through the penetrations in the house, the better. Absolutely.
So Duffy, you do foam, and I've over the years have run into people that have done it incorrectly, or they haven't thought it through, or they didn't understand it when they introduced it into an existing structure, and they had problems with rotting roofs. They have problems with all kinds of rot, mold, things like that, because the foam will trap moisture if moisture gets in it. Are you using this, does this aero barrier, is it helping your clients sort of guard against that?
Well, anytime we can give more options, that makes us more viable as a contractor. The open cell foam is not a rated vapor barrier. I think where the most of the problems come from is the mechanical contractor not introducing fresh air because the house is too tight, and they're just not cycling it, and they're having a humidity problem. So when it's not necessarily the foam itself.
So Justin, when you use the aero barrier system, you're basically taking total control of the interior envelope of the house, and you're
absolutely correct there. And when we seal the house very, very tight, now you can control how the air comes in. So you can pre-filter it with stuff like items like ERVs or HRVs if you're up north, and control pre-filter that air before it comes into the house versus air just leaking through and bringing in pollen, dust, heat, moisture.
Does this require then that you pay a lot more attention to the mechanics, the filtration system? I mean, I've always liked a little fresh air coming in, whether it's coming in around the windows or through the windows. I've always felt really secure with that, like you say, that air exchange, so that the air is being cleaned out. But if you have a house that is just totally sealed like this, you really need to pay attention to how you're filtering it, and all the different options available to keep that air from just sort of pumping bio whatever around that you don't want to be breathing.
Right, you're absolutely correct. So when we are in the sales funnel of selling aero barrier, we want to know these things. We want to know, we want to get with the HVAC contractor and make sure everything's being right sized, because a lot of the software, there's a default air change of 7 air changes, and we definitely want to make sure that's changed in their load calculation, so that if they need to bring in an ERV and we're taking the house, down to passive numbers or lower, then they can make sure the indoor air quality of the house and everything is sized correctly.
So Matt,
not lower, not too high, but we always say sized correctly.
Matt, let's talk about your builders that are taking this product and using it. Are you getting any like production type builders? I'm sure they'd have to be high-end production builders. I guess the key to it would be the cost factor. Is it a very expensive process to go in and do this on, say, a 2,500 square foot house?
Yeah, so the price definitely varies. There's a lot of variables, not to dance around the issue of cost, because that's obviously a concern for homeowners, for production builders, and the like. Really kind of what we're gauging when we price things out are how tight is the building envelope to start, right? What are we getting ourselves into? How are we best servicing this client? But then when you look into whatever the, typically a price per square foot, and that's done typically contractor to contractor. We do see very similarities in the marketplace around that, maybe $1.50 a square foot, somewhere in that range, depending on variables. But really kind of to finish up that, to kind of close the loop on it, once you right size your mechanical equipment, as Justin was saying, once you use insulation packages that deliver the same R value at less of a cost because you are sealing off the interior and creating that continuous air barrier. And once you right size your mechanical equipment and your ductwork and your insulation packages, all these things, the overall impact on the build drops lower and lower and lower.
So
and really kind of provides an efficiency umbrella without the general overall cost going through the roof.
So there's a cause and effect cost-wise. There's some trade-offs.
Yes, sir. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and as we've become a lot more sophisticated with our inside environment of our homes and the air conditioning and mechanical and the energy efficiency, we've learned to sort of have to almost have a pick list of where we want to go with our dollars. Do we want more efficient windows, more efficient air conditioning? We have to most of us have to reach a minimum efficiency, and not everybody can do everything. You can't
of course
get to 100%. So Justin, give us sort of an idea of the process of, if we're going to use aero barrier from your perspective. Let's say a builder calls you and says, okay, I want to use a system. Where do you start, and what is that process to determine if it's right for him?
Absolutely. Well, first I want to know, what are they looking for? Are they looking for, an efficient home? Are they looking for less dust? Do they have health conditions in the family? Because this all takes place again with the indoor air quality. So that's one of the first things I want to ask and kind of read where they are with the energy efficiency, where they are with the air sealing, right? And then I kind of want to know more about how they're building. Are they doing advanced framing, 2x6 walls, 2x4 walls? Are they using spray foam, fiberglass, cellulose?
So you're sort of determining the overall attitude of the builder and towards the efficiency of the home.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You're trying to sort of assess the builder's efficiency that he's building the home to begin with. In other words, well, here's a question. If I'm remodeling a house that's built in 1930 and I'm going to gut it, should I consider this type of product, or is there just going to be too much air leakage for it to be valuable for me?
No, absolutely. So when we assess the house, I will walk the house and make sure if there are big holes, we can seal them before we do the aero barrier process, right? So if there's shiplap and there's slats missing and bricks exposed and all that good stuff, we can come in and pre-seal and get you to a good starting number where we can use the aero barrier to find the little stuff that we cannot see.
Okay, so one of the things that I neglected to tell our audience, or have you tell our audience, what is aero barrier?
Aero barrier is an air sealant where we pressurize the space. So we use an actual blower door. We're seeing live results as we're sealing. So the blower door is pressurizing the space up to 100 pascals, and we're spraying an atomized acrylic-based sealant in the air. So it's like holding cans of spray paint in the air. So it's atomized. It's very small particles, and that sealant's not going to go anywhere until the blower door is pushing that sealant through the air to the holes on the exterior envelope of the house.
It's like blowing up a balloon that's got little holes in it, but you're putting something in there that's going to fill the holes. Absolutely.
It's like fix a flat for the house.
Fix a flat for the house. That's perfect. That's perfect. And so the point of the system is to block the holes from the inside of the house, because of course if you visualize this as the homeowner, and you're not used to building houses, remember that if you have whatever you have on the outside of the house, brick, siding, whatever it is, it's covering up the wall. So from the outside, you can't see it. And so the aero barrier system really addresses it from the inside. And that's what I think the beauty of the system is. So, you guys, I really appreciate it. This has been a fascinating interview. I'm a big proponent of this whole process and your product. I appreciate you coming on with us this morning and telling our audience about your fantastic product. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. If you are interested in these videos that we're producing and you like our show, please go to our YouTube at Remodel Revolution and subscribe and share. We really would appreciate that. Also, like us on Facebook and follow us. Also, check out our podcast, Remodel Revolution. I publish it in Spreaker, but we're on everything. We're on Apple. We're on all of the major platforms and a whole lot of the little platforms too. Also, check out Texas Weather Tracker TV. I think I said that right. Did I say that right, Jason? I did. Texas Weather TV. And this show is rebroadcast on Sundays at 1 and 3 on Apple, Roku, and Amazon TV at 1 and 3. And so that'll conclude our broadcast today. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next week with another Remodel Revolution show.
The views and opinions of this program are for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to replace the recommendations of a hired professional. You can catch Remodel Revolution anytime. Follow the show on the website, remodelrevolutionradio.com, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, using the handle at Remodel Revolution Radio. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn, and watch the show anytime on YouTube.